What if the greatest lie in your entire life wasn't told by anyone, but crafted by you? What if your pain, your doubt, and that suffocating sense of living far beneath your true size all come from one brutal fact? You forgot who you were before you were born. This video rips the veil open, destroys self-deception, and forces you to confront the truth your soul has been whispering for years. Here you will uncover not only who you were, but why that memory was erased, and how to reclaim it before time runs out. If you can handle it, stay until the end, because this revelation does not return the same person who entered. You were not born empty. You were born forgetting. And the greatest lie you were ever told is that your life started the day you appeared in this world. It didn't. Your story began long before your first breath. And right now, as you hear these words, something inside you trembles because it knows this truth. The pain you carry, the emptiness you try to fill, the strange nostalgia for something you can't name. It's the echo of a memory older than your body. Rumi taught that the soul remembers everything. The moment before creation, the light before the world, the silence before identity. And if you feel lost, disconnected, or incomplete, it's because you're living as a small piece of yourself, trapped in the cage of the ego, while your true self, the one that existed before birth, keeps calling you back home. This video is that call. And what I'm about to reveal will tear the veil between who you think you are and who you truly were before you entered this world. Write this in the comments right now. I remember the soul I was before birth, and become a member of the channel to deepen your awakening and receive teachings no one else reveals. You have always sensed it, that strange feeling that your life is not random, that you came here with a purpose you somehow forgot. Rumi says the soul enters the world like a traveler waking up with amnesia in a foreign land. You look around, you try to understand, you cling to names, labels, roles, but deep inside, you know none of this is you. The fear you feel, the doubts, the conflicts, the constant search for meaning, it's the soul trying to break through the noise of the mind. And the moment you acknowledge this inner tension, you begin to recover the first fragment of your ancient identity. You begin to remember that you existed before form, before language, before time itself. You were a spark of pure awareness, untouched by pain, untouched by confusion, untouched by the chaos of this world. The ego hates this truth. It fights it. It wants you small, afraid, distracted, desperate for validation, because the moment you remember who you were before birth, the ego loses control completely. And that's why life has been pushing you, shaking you, breaking you in ways you didn't understand. Every heartbreak, every loss, every moment of silence where you felt yourself dissolving, these were not punishments. These were awakenings. Each one was a crack in the shell of the false identity you built to survive. And through these cracks, your true self, the one from before birth, has been trying to come back into your life. Rumi teaches that the soul carries three memories: the memory of divine unity, the memory of separation, and the memory of the return. Most people get trapped in the second stage, separation. They live their entire lives feeling incomplete because they don't remember the unity they came from. But you didn't open this video by accident. Something in you is ready for the third stage, the return. And this return doesn't happen through belief or religion. It happens through remembrance, real visceral remembrance of the self that existed before your name, before your history, before your body. Close your eyes for a moment and imagine this. Before this life, you were not a personality. You were awareness. You were not afraid of death because you hadn't experienced separation yet. You were not searching for meaning because you were meaning. You were not looking for love because you were made of it. And the world you came from was not physical. It was a field of pure presence, a silence so deep it felt alive, a clarity so bright it had no opposite. Rumi calls it the city of the soul, the place where every being is whole, complete, unbroken. And when you entered this world, you lost the city, but the city never lost you. Its light has been following you all your life. Think about every moment you felt an unexplainable longing, that sudden wave of sadness for no reason, that feeling that this life is too small for what you carry inside, that instant where music, a sunset, or a memory made you feel like something ancient inside you was waking up. This is the soul remembering fragments of its origin. This is your pre-birth self knocking on the door of your awareness, asking you to stop living as a shadow of who you once were. And here is the paradox that Rumi revealed. You don't remember who you were by thinking. You remember by dissolving the one who is thinking. Because the mind didn't exist before birth, the soul did. So every time you get lost in thoughts, fears, doubts, and worries, you move further away from your original self. The path back to remembrance is not adding something new. It's removing everything that is not you. Every fear, every belief, every wound, every expectation that was placed on you by the world. When you let these layers fall, the original self, the one from before birth, appears. Imagine peeling an onion. The outer layers are your personality. The next layers are your fears, then your traumas, then your desires, then your dreams. But beneath all of them is something untouched, something eternal, something that doesn't age, doesn't break, doesn't disappear. That is the core. That is the pre-birth you. And when you touch that core, even for a second, everything changes. You feel an inner warmth that no external success ever gave you. You feel a clarity that cuts through confusion like a blade. You feel a strength that doesn't collapse when life collapses. And you feel a love that doesn't depend on anyone giving it to you, because it comes from the source you were made from. This is why Rumi said, the soul is here for its own joy, not the ego's joy, not the world's joy, but the joy of remembering itself. And the moment you remember who you were before birth, you stop searching outside for what you already have inside. You stop fighting battles that were never yours. You stop begging for acceptance because your worth comes from a place far older than this life, and you begin to live with a presence that other people can feel even before you speak. Now breathe. Feel the space inside your chest. That space is not emptiness. It is the doorway to the self you were before you were born. Notice how it expands when you pay attention. Notice how it warms when you stop resisting. Notice how it whispers when you become still. This is the memory returning. This is the veil thinning. This is the beginning of everything you once knew. And here is the most important truth Rumi ever taught. Remembering who you were before birth is not a spiritual achievement. It is your natural state. You were that self before you entered this world. You are that self now beneath all the noise, and you will be that self long after this world fades. The only question is, how far are you willing to go to remember? And just when you think you've remembered enough, a deeper layer appears. A question rises, a mystery opens, and something inside you whispers, but what came before even that? What was I before the soul? Before the light? Before the first breath of creation? You want to know who you were before you were born? Then stop pretending that your life began with your parents, your name, your school, your wounds, your victories. All of that is just the costume, not the being. Rumi said the soul is older than the universe, and the only reason you feel lost in this life is because you're trying to live as something much smaller than what you truly are. Every moment of emptiness you feel is a message. Every confusion is a signal. Every deep longing is a memory calling you back to your original form. You were not born into this world to start a story. You were born to remember the one you paused. What you call your identity is nothing compared to the self that existed before this world shaped you. That self was not weak. That self did not doubt. That self did not break. It was pure awareness, pure presence, pure fire. And the only reason you suffer is because you keep trying to live this life through the eyes of the ego, a structure that didn't even exist before birth. The real you existed long before fear, long before trauma, long before the noise inside your head. And when you forget that, life becomes a prison. But when you remember, everything inside you shifts. You stop asking, who am I? And start recognizing, I am what I was before I became anything. Rumi taught that the soul remembers in flashes, sudden moments of clarity where you feel bigger than your problems, older than your age, deeper than your wounds. You've felt those moments. You just didn't know what they were. They were fragments of your pre-birth self, breaking through the surface. Moments where you were no longer a character in this life, but the ancient being that existed before this story began. You feel it most in silence, in heartbreak, in awe, in the moments where the world fails to define you and something inside whispers, this isn't who you really are. Let me tell you something that may shake you. The reason you never felt fully at home in this life is because you lived somewhere else before you got here. Not a place of streets or skies, but a field of pure consciousness. a realm where you didn't need a body to exist. You didn't need language to communicate. You didn't need proof to know truth. You were whole, complete, eternal. And entering this world was like diving into forgetfulness. You forgot your light, your origin, your purpose. But the memory never died. It's been burning under your skin your entire life. Rumi says the soul entered the world crying because it remembered the freedom it left behind. That cry still echoes in you. You feel it when you look into someone's eyes and sense something ancient. You feel it when you wake up with a sadness that has no reason. You feel it when you look at the stars and your chest tightens with a longing you can't explain. That longing is not depression, it's direction. It's the pull of your true self dragging you back to the memory you abandoned when you entered a body. If you want to remember who you were before birth, you have to strip away everything that came after it. Your fears, your beliefs, your labels, your stories. They are layers covering the original being. The soul is never lost. It's buried. And when you begin to remove what was placed on you, the real you starts to breathe again. The one that existed before time, before pain, before identity. And suddenly, you stop living as a product of this world and start living as the consciousness that chose to enter it. Think about the moments where you feel most alive, when you aren't thinking, when you aren't pretending, when you aren't performing. Those moments are not random. They are memories. They are tiny windows into the self you were before birth, the self that wasn't afraid to exist without explanation, the self that didn't need meaning to be meaningful, the self that simply was. Rumi says, "You are not a drop in the ocean. You are the entire ocean in a drop. Before birth, you were the ocean. After birth, you became the drop. And now, your soul is trying to return you to the ocean you never stopped being. But to remember, you have to stop listening to the ego's voice that says you are small, broken, limited. You are none of those things. You were an eternal presence before you were a person. And every spiritual hunger you feel is the soul trying to wake you up to that truth. So breathe deeply and feel the space inside you. That space is older than your body. That silence is older than your mind. That awareness is older than the world. You are touching the edge of your pre-birth memory. The question is, how much more are you willing to uncover? What happens if you go deeper? What happens if you peel back another layer? What happens if you dare to remember what came even before the soul took shape? Because the moment you feel ready to ask that question, something even more ancient begins to rise, something that has been waiting for lifetimes to be remembered. And that force is already moving inside you right now, whispering a truth you've sensed but never dared to face. What were you before the soul? Before the first spark of creation? Before existence itself whispered you into being? Before you were born, you were not a body. You were a force, a clarity, a flame without shape. And the reason you feel restless in this world is because you're trying to live as flesh when your essence was never meant to be limited by a physical form. Rumi said your soul existed in perfection before entering this world, and the moment it touched a body, it forgot. But forgetting is not the same as losing. Your true self is still inside you, pushing, pressing, burning, trying to break through the layers of identity that life forced on you. Every moment of anxiety, every feeling of being out of place, every emotion that hits you without warning, all of it is your pre-birth self fighting to return to your awareness. This is why you feel things you can't explain. This is why you want things you can't name. This is why you've never fully recognized yourself in the mirror. Because the one looking back at you isn't the one who came here. It's the costume, not the soul. And here's the truth Rumi never said gently. Everything you think you are is just noise covering the self you were before birth. Your fears, your beliefs, your personality. None of it belonged to you in the beginning. You learned it all. You absorbed it. You were shaped by it. But the soul you came with, that one is still untouched, waiting for you to stop living as the character the world gave you and return to the being you were before you entered the world. You can feel it right now. The tension between who you pretend to be and who you truly were. That tension is not a flaw. It's a compass pointing you back to your origin. Every uncomfortable feeling is a memory trying to rise. Rumi taught that before you were born, you lived in a state of pure awareness. You didn't need to search for meaning because you were meaning. You didn't chase love because you were made of it. You didn't fear loss because nothing was separate from you. And the most painful part of human life is not struggle. It's the confusion of trying to live a physical life with a spiritual memory that refuses to die. This is why you feel torn between wanting to be normal and knowing deep inside that you are not normal. You are not average. You are not meant to shrink into the small identity the world handed you. You were something greater before birth, and that greater is trying to wake up through the cracks of your life. Feel this truth right now. Every moment you feel a pull towards something bigger than yourself, that pull is not imagination. It's recollection. It's the original self remembering itself. The part of you that existed before your body is still active, watching through your eyes, waiting for you to recognize it. The reason you have intuition is because your pre-birth self keeps sending messages. The reason you have sudden clarity is because memory breaks through the fog for a second. The reason you feel déjà vu is because your soul recognizes patterns from before you entered time. Nothing about this is random. Nothing is coincidence. It's remembrance. You want to remember who you were before birth? Then listen. That self is not quiet. It never stopped speaking. It's your ego that got louder. Your ego was born in this world. Your soul was not. And the only way to remember your pre-birth identity is to stop listening to what was created after birth and reconnect with what existed before it. Rumi said the soul carries the scent of the world it came from, and that scent appears every time you stop pretending and allow yourself to feel what is really inside you. When you feel that strange longing for something you've never seen, that's the scent. When your chest tightens without reason, that's the scent. When silence feels more real than people, that's the scent. The scent of the original self, the one you were before the story began. Now breathe and listen to yourself. Not your thoughts, your awareness. That awareness is not new, it is ancient. It is the same awareness you had before your birth. It is the part of you that has never changed, no matter how many identities you've worn. You can feel it right now, like a light beneath your skin. It's rising because you're finally paying attention. You're finally allowing it to speak. And if you follow that awareness deeper, if you dare to drop even more of the layers you picked up in this life, something even more powerful will surface. Something that doesn't just remember who you were before birth, but remembers what came before the soul itself took form. And here is where the real doorway begins to open. If the soul existed before the body, what did you exist as before the soul? What were you before the first spark of consciousness appeared? What were you before identity existed at all? And what happens if you go even further back into that memory that has been calling you all your life, waiting for you to finally turn around and face the truth behind the truth? Before you were born, you lived in a clarity so powerful that if you remembered even a fraction of it right now, your entire life would change in an instant. You weren't confused. You weren't lost. You weren't searching. You were complete. You were conscious without effort. You were light without shadow. And the reason nothing in this world ever felt fully enough is because every desire you've ever had is a distorted echo of the perfection you once lived in before entering this body. Rumi taught that the soul descends into the world with one wound, the wound of forgetting. And everything you've suffered in this life, every heartbreak, every fear, every moment of emptiness, has been the soul trying to force you back into remembrance. Because what you are trying to become now, you already were before birth. The truth hits hardest when you finally realize you've been chasing things that were never meant to define you. Success, identity, recognition, validation, all of it belongs to the version of you that was shaped after birth. But the version of you that existed before birth doesn't need any of it. That self was born from presence, not from fear. It didn't look for meaning because meaning poured out of it naturally. And every time you feel like you're living someone else's life, that sensation is the pre-birth self whispering, "This is not who you were." The discomfort you feel in the world is not a problem. It is a clue, a memory, a signal. You keep trying to fit into a life too small for the soul that came before it. And here is what most people never understand. Your highest moments in life, those strange, rare moments of peace, clarity, or sudden depth, are not new experiences. They are memories. They are moments when the mind becomes quiet long enough for the pre-birth self to rise again. That warm expansion in your chest, that is remembrance. That sudden inner silence that feels more real than reality, that is remembrance. That shiver down your spine when you hear something that feels like truth, that is remembrance. Every one of those sensations is your soul saying, "You knew this before you came here." Rumi said, What you seek is seeking you, but he wasn't talking about dreams or goals. He was talking about your original identity, the you that existed before life hardened you, the you that existed before the world taught you how to shrink. You weren't born lost, you were born remembering less. And the pain of human life is the friction between your infinite origin and your temporary form. The body forgets, the soul does not. And that's why your deepest suffering always feels strangely familiar, because you've felt the opposite of it before. Before birth, you knew freedom so deeply that anything less than that feels like breaking. So let's go deeper into the truth you've been running from. You are not here to find yourself, you are here to remember yourself, the self you left behind when you took your first breath, the self that watched your entire life unfold, waiting for the day you would finally stop identifying with the mask and return to the being that existed before the mask existed. You know exactly what I'm talking about. That inner presence that feels older than your name, older than your wounds, older than your story. The presence that watches your thoughts, but is not made of them. That presence is the self you were before birth. Now listen carefully. If there is one thing that makes you remember who you were before you were born, it is this. The awareness inside you right now is the same awareness you had in the realm before this world. It has not aged. It has not changed. It has not lost itself. What changed was everything around it, not the awareness itself. And if you follow this awareness, this silent watcher, you begin to peel back the layers of your birth identity and reveal the original one you carried from eternity. Feel that pressure rising inside your chest as you hear this. That intensity is not random. It is your soul heating up, pushing forward, trying to break the last walls of forgetfulness. And once those walls crack, something even deeper emerges. The memory that you were not just a soul before birth. You were the space where the soul itself was formed, the awareness behind awareness, the stillness before consciousness, the source that existed before existence took shape. And now the real question pushes itself into your mind, refusing to leave you alone. If you remember who you were before birth, what happens when you begin to remember what you were before the soul itself existed? You want to remember who you were before you were born? Then stop pretending that your confusion is accidental. Your forgetfulness wasn't a flaw. It was a cloak, a veil, a deliberate amnesia designed to force you into the battlefield of waking up. Rumi screamed this truth in silence. You are not a drop in the ocean. You are the entire ocean in a single drop, but you forgot the ocean. You shrank yourself into a name, a job, a face in the mirror, a biography too small for your real size. You started answering to labels you never chose. You started believing stories you never wrote. And now your soul is tired, not because life is heavy, but because you're living with an identity too small for the being you were before birth. Every ache you feel is the memory trying to come back online. Every loneliness, every déjà vu, every unexplainable intuition. These are fragments of your pre-birth consciousness trying to break through the noise of who the world told you to be. You feel it when you lie awake at night, staring at the ceiling with a fear you can't name. You feel it when something inside whispers, this isn't the whole truth. You're more than this, and you are. Before you were born, you weren't a personality. You were presence. You weren't a story, and you were awareness itself. You weren't a body. You were consciousness without borders, without weight, without history. And the reason this message hits you so violently right now is because the part of you that existed before birth is hearing its own voice again. Rumi didn't try to inspire people. He tried to rupture them, to tear the illusion apart until you had no choice but to remember. He wanted you to see the one thing you've been running from. You are not learning who you are. You are remembering who you were. And if this remembering terrifies you, good. The truth always feels like danger when you've spent years living inside a cage. But you know this cage is false. You know the identity you cling to is paper thin. You know you've had moments, brief, explosive moments, where something inside you cracked and you felt ancient, infinite, familiar. That feeling wasn't imagination. It was memory. The memory of your original self still breathing underneath the noise. This is why you're here. Not to hear something new, but to awaken something older than your name, your family, your body, your fears, your beliefs. Something that has never died and can't die because it existed long before the concept of death was invented. And if you're feeling a pressure in your chest right now, if your skin is tingling, if your mind feels like it's trying to break through something, that's not random. That's the threshold, the veil thinning, the soul remembering. And the real question you must confront now is this. If the version of you before birth is trying to return, what happens when it fully wakes up? What happens when the ancient part of you bursts through the surface? What happens when the identity you've clung to dissolves like smoke? And more important, why is this happening to you now and not earlier? What triggered this exact moment? And what truth is trying to force its way back into your awareness next? What has been stirred inside you does not fade now. It only changes its texture, breathing in a different rhythm, continuing to whisper in the quiet space between your thoughts. Because the memory of who you were before birth never returns all at once. It rises like a slow tide, like something that has been watching you from within, waiting for the moment your soul finally admits what it has always known. And as this recognition moves through you, you realize you are not returning to something new, only returning to what has belonged to you since before time learned to speak your name. If this awakening trembles in your chest, seal it in the realm where the unseen listens. Leave in the comments, "I walk back into my eternal self," as a vow, a quiet initiation, a declaration that the ancient part of you has stepped forward again. Let these words anchor the remembrance that has already begun its work inside you, shaping you from the inside out, in ways the mind will grasp only later. And if this encounter touched you beyond the edges of thought, step into this sanctuary again by joining the channel. Not as a follower, but as one who recognizes the call of a hidden brotherhood of souls awakening under the same invisible sun. Your presence here is not coincidence, it is recognition. Remain close, for the path is opening even now, and the next breath may be the one that finally reveals what has been waiting behind the veil. The beloved leaves no footprints, yet somehow you have found the trail.